still a virgin. The millionaire couldn't believe it. And what he did changed everything. Chicago, early November. The sky hung low, releasing sheets of cold rain without pause. Downtown streets were packed with honking cars and rushing crowds. Amid that restless stream, a small figure hurried along, clutching a folder that was quickly soaking through. Maya Lopez, 26 years old, pulled her frayed coat tighter. She glanced at her watch. 6:12 in the evening. If she didn't hurry, she would miss her interior design class at the community center, a class she had scraped together her front desk wages to afford. "Please don't rain harder," Maya whispered, weaving through a sea of umbrellas. Everyone carried one, except her. Her father, Jorge, a retired factory worker, widower, had spent his life caring for his only daughter. Maya carried his resilience, and from her late mother, she held on to gentleness. They lived in a small apartment with peeling paint and windows that groaned in the wind. Yet within it, there was still laughter, still hope, most of it radiating from Maya. Turning sharply onto the corner, she collided with a tall figure stepping out of a shining glass building. "Oh!" Her folder flew from her arms, papers scattering, soaking in the rain. Maya dropped to her knees, heart pounding, scrambling to gather them as if her entire future lay on the pavement. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Her voice cracked, muffled by rain. The man stopped. Early 30s, tall, dark suit, sharp eyes, but not distant. Instead of irritation, he knelt immediately, hands swift as he gathered the pages, ignoring the cold, wet ground. "Let me help you," he said, voice deep and steady. Maya looked up. Her brown eyes met his. There was no condescension there, no pity, only sincerity, calm enough to still the storm around them. "Thank you. I dropped everything," Maya stammered, clutching the stack with trembling hands. "We'll get it all back," he assured, tilting his leather briefcase above her head to shield her. Just then, a driver hurried forward carrying a large umbrella. "Mr. Cole, the car is ready." Maya froze. Adrian Cole. That was the name spoken aloud, but to her, in that moment, he was only a stranger kneeling on a cold sidewalk, helping her without hesitation. Together, they collected almost all of it. A few pages were blurred, but legible enough. Maya exhaled in relief. "Thank you so much. I'm sorry for the trouble." "No trouble at all. Are you hurt?" Adrian asked gently. She shook her head. "No, only that I'm late for class." He checked his watch. 6:18. "Where is your class?" "Community Center on Fulton, but I've probably missed it." "Would you like a ride?" he offered. Maya hesitated. Her father always warned her not to accept favors too quickly, but in his eyes, there was nothing threatening. "If it's not too much trouble." "Not at all. I'm Adrian," he extended his hand. "Maya," she replied, gripping it. Warm, steady. Neither of them knew that on that rain-soaked Chicago street, a story had just begun. One that would change both of their lives forever. The black car glided smoothly along the rain-slicked streets, yellow streetlights shimmering in the puddles. Maya sat in the back seat, hands folded neatly over her purse, trying to keep them from trembling. The interior was too refined, the scent of leather and faint mint making her feel out of place. Adrian sat beside her, gazing briefly out the window before asking softly, "You study at the community center on Fulton, right?" "Yes, number 132 Fulton," Maya replied quietly, eyes fixed forward. "We'll make it on time," he assured with a smile. Maya nodded. She had never ridden in a car like this, Every detail, the supple leather, the soft ambient glow, made her feel she didn't belong. Yet what unsettled her most wasn't the car. It was the man sitting beside her. "I'm guessing you work before class?" Adrian prompted. "Yes. I'm a front desk clerk at a small hotel near the river. This class is one of the few things I've saved up for. To invest in myself," Maya said earnestly. "Investing in yourself is always the wisest investment," Adrian replied with a nod. Maya smiled faintly. "I hope so. I'd like to find a better job, maybe in interior design. Ever since I was little, I loved drawing houses and arranging spaces. These days I try to be more practical. I just want my father to stop working so much." The words struck Adrian quietly, like a blade he hadn't expected. For a moment, he said nothing, eyes distant. Behind his composed exterior lay a hollow space he rarely let anyone touch. "You sound like someone who works very hard," he said gently. "Not always, but my father worked 3 jobs when I was in high school. I can't let him keep sacrificing everything," Maya replied softly. "He must be proud of you." Maya was silent for a few seconds before turning slightly. "What about you? What do you do if you don't mind me asking?" "Technology," Adrian answered simply. "Project development." "Oh, so I guess you're always busy." "Busy enough to be tired by the weekend," he chuckled. "But sometimes being tired is the best excuse to pause, breathe, and meet interesting people." Her cheeks warmed. It didn't sound like flirting. It felt real, like someone truly cared. The car pulled up in front of the community center. Adrian stepped out first, opening the door for her. "Thank you for the ride," Maya said softly. "My pleasure," he replied warmly. She stepped out, but before the door closed, his voice followed her. "Maya." "Yes?" "If you ever feel like having coffee after class, I usually don't have plans in the evening." Maya hesitated, a small smile tugging at her lips. I'll think about it. Just coffee, no pressure." Adrian winked, then signaled the driver to pull away. Maya stood on the sidewalk, watching the car disappear into the traffic. Inside her, something unfamiliar stirred. Not part of any plan she'd written for her life, but on a rainy night like this, maybe she could allow herself a little hope. 1 week after their rainy encounter, Maya finished her design class on a Friday evening and found Adrian waiting beneath a lamppost outside the community center. He carried no umbrella, just stood there with his hands in his coat pockets, wearing that soft smile. "What are you doing here?" she asked, surprised. "Waiting to see if you'd say yes to that coffee." She chuckled, a hint of shyness brushing her cheeks. "How long have you been waiting?" "Only about 30 minutes, but if you say yes, it'll be worth it." Maya glanced at her watch. 8:45 in the evening. Tomorrow was Saturday, no early shift. Her father was used to her staying out late on weekends. After a brief pause, she nodded. "All right, but just 1 cup." "Just one," Adrian said, his voice light as spring air. They chose a small cafe around the corner. Inside it was warm, golden light spilling across wooden tables, soft jazz humming from an old speaker. Maya picked a table by the window where she could watch people rushing past under the drizzle. Adrian ordered black coffee. Maya chose a latte. When the cups arrived, he tilted his head toward her, eyes filled with gentle curiosity. "You said you loved drawing houses. Do you still draw?" Maya blinked. "How do you know?" "Last time, when you mentioned architecture, your eyes lit up. People who just like something speak plainly. People who love, they glow." She laughed softly. "I haven't drawn seriously since senior year. Life got busy, reality too heavy for dreams. Maybe it's time to start again, Adrian said quietly. More suggestion than advice. Maya looked at him. Really looked. In the cafe's warm light, he wasn't a successful man behind a wall of distance. He was simply a person, trying to connect in the most honest way he knew. "What about you?" she asked. "What did you love before work took over?" Adrian was silent a moment. "Photography. I once wanted to capture stories through images. But then, I got too busy to believe I had the right to dream." Maya thought for a while. "I think sometimes people just need someone to remind them who they used to be." Their eyes met, with jazz breathing softly around them. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of something unspoken, clear. In the weeks that followed, a rhythm formed. Not every day, but most evenings, Adrian's messages arrived. "How was today?" Or "Did you eat dinner?" At first, Maya found it unusual, but soon she came to expect it. Together they explored quiet corners of the city, a cafe tucked down an alley, a park bench facing the lake, a food stand selling hot fries. Not loud dates, but simple, gentle moments. Maya often spoke about her father, about the years he worked tirelessly to raise her. Adrian listened intently, rarely interrupting, sometimes only asking one more question. About himself, he said little of work. Instead, he mentioned lazy mornings or the time he scribbled a few lines in an old notebook before closing it again. That pure friendship slowly shifted into something else. Not loud confessions, not urgency, just quiet care, steady and patient. Maya kept a little distance, unsure if she deserved real love. Adrian never pushed. He waited, listened, let the bond grow at its own pace. One evening, sitting together on a park bench, a bag of hot fries between them, Maya watched the city lights shimmer across the lake. The rain had stopped, the air crisp. She whispered, "It's strange. Since I met you, I've started to see everything around me as just a little more beautiful." Adrian said nothing, only tilted his head toward her. In his eyes, she saw sincerity, rare, unguarded, true. From a simple cup of coffee, their quiet conversations had become a refuge. And from that refuge, something softer than friendship began to bloom. Evening coffees, walks by the lake, bags of hot fries shared in silence, all had become a steady rhythm in Maya's life. Despite long hotel shifts and piles of design assignments, her heart always lifted when his familiar messages arrived. "Did you eat dinner? How was today?" One Friday evening after class, Maya met Clara, her best friend from high school, for a quick snack in the park nearby. Clara, who worked part-time at a clothing store, was blunt, curious, but always caring. "You've been different lately," Clara teased, unwrapping her sandwich. "You're hiding something good from me, aren't you?" Maya laughed, avoiding her gaze. "It's nothing, just that I've been spending time with someone." "Oh," Clara leaned in playfully. "And? Handsome?" "Well, kind. When I'm with him, I feel calm. He works in tech, some project development. I didn't ask much more." Maya shrugged, trying to sound casual, though her drifting smile betrayed her. Clara raised an eyebrow, but only smiled. "Fine, I won't pry. Just promise me you won't let anyone hurt you." A few days later, on Thursday night, as Maya stepped out of class, her phone buzzed. A message from Clara. "Maya, you need to see this." Attached was a link. Maya hesitated, then tapped. The headline appeared in bold. "Adrian Cole, founder and CEO of Nexora Technologies." There he was on her screen, dressed in a dark suit, standing atop a skyscraper, city lights blazing behind him. The same eyes, the same smile. The man who had sat across from her in a tiny cafe, who had listened so carefully to her stories. Frantically, she scrolled. Line after line, billion-dollar valuations, landmark deals, international awards. The name repeated, Adrian Cole. Why? Why hadn't he told her? That night, Adrian's usual message arrived. Did you get home safely? Maya stared at it for a long time, but didn't reply. Her chest ached, not because he was powerful, but because of the distance built by silence. The next evening, as always, Adrian waited outside the community center. When Maya emerged, he smiled, but his smile faded as she walked past without pausing. Maya, Adrian called. She stopped, turned. Her voice wasn't angry, but heavy with sorrow. You didn't have to hide. You didn't have to pretend to be ordinary for me to like you. Soft words, but sharp as a blade. Adrian froze. Slowly he spoke. I never meant to deceive you. I just wanted you to see me. Not the name, not the numbers. Maya's eyes glistened with disappointment. She shook her head lightly, then walked away. That night, Maya sat by the window of her small apartment. Streetlight glowed faintly against the glass. Inside her, something fragile broke. Not because Adrian was rich, not because he was famous, but because he had chosen silence, just when she had chosen to trust. Foolish, she whispered, to think I could be the exception. In the days that followed, Maya still went to work, still attended her design classes, but everything felt mechanical, empty. She smiled at hotel guests, yet her smile was thin. She opened her notebook on the subway, yet her gaze drifted out the window. In class, she sat in her usual seat. The professor spoke, classmates chatted, but it all washed past her. Her mind circled back to moments with Adrian, the sound of his quiet laugh, the way he listened when she spoke of her father, the calm in his eyes as they sat by the lake. Now it all felt like a fragile dream slipping away. One evening, over dinner in their tiny kitchen, Jorge watched his daughter closely. He had seen the shadow in her for days. Setting down his spoon, he asked gently, "Sweetheart, what sorrow is in your eyes? You used to smile so much." Maya froze. She wanted to hide it, but at last she sighed. "I trusted someone, Dad. I trusted him with all I had. But then I realized I never really knew who he was." Jorge placed his rough hand over hers, his gaze steady and warm. "You're not hurting because he's wealthy, are you? You're hurting because you believed. And when trust is broken, it cuts deeper than anything." Tears welled up. Maya leaned into her father's shoulder, grateful that at least one place was still safe. Across the city, Adrian was no better. He still went to Nexora's office, still sat in meetings, still shook important hands. But inside, everything was hollow. Numbers, contracts, thick reports, they had lost their weight. At night, he sat alone by the window of his high-rise apartment. Outside, the city glittered, but in him there was only shadow. Whenever he closed his eyes, he saw Maya in her worn coat, her eyes glowing as she spoke of her dreams, and then he saw those same eyes break when the truth surfaced. Unable to bear it, Adrian called Elena, his younger sister, that weekend. She had always been the one he trusted. Hearing his rough voice on the line, she asked immediately, "What happened, Adrian?" "I knew something was wrong." "I ruined it, Elena," he confessed. "I met someone. She made me feel like myself, but I hid. I thought if she knew who I was, she'd leave. And in the end, hiding is exactly what made her walk away." Elena was silent for a few moments, then sighed. You weren't wrong to love her. You were only wrong not to believe she was strong enough to love the real you. Adrian, if you truly want her back, then show up as yourself. Not as the CEO, not as the man in the headlines, just Adrian. Adrian gripped the phone tightly, fear and hope colliding in his chest. He knew she was right. But one question lingered. Was it already too late? Sunday came with a heavy sky, clouds hanging low as if something important was about to unfold. Maya had just returned from the grocery store when she froze. At her doorstep, a familiar figure stood waiting. Adrian. No sleek car, no sharp suit, just a man in a dark coat, hands tucked into his pockets, eyes fixed on the ground as if gathering the last of his courage. When Maya saw him, her chest tightened. Part of her wanted to turn away. Part of her wanted to stay. At last, she exhaled and asked quietly, "What do you want?" Adrian lifted his gaze. His voice was rough, stripped of its usual confidence. "I just want to talk, just a few minutes." Maya said nothing. Then she nodded. They sat on the old stone bench near the stoop. Distance stretched between them, wide enough for the cold wind to pass through. "I was wrong," Adrian began. "Not for who I am, but for not trusting you with the truth. I wanted to hold on to the ordinary feeling I had when I was with you. But out of fear, I destroyed it myself." Maya kept her eyes forward, her voice low. "You said you wanted me to see Adrian, not the CEO, but you didn't think I mattered enough to know the truth. You took away my choice." The words cut through the silence. Adrian swallowed hard, pain flickering in his eyes, but he didn't argue. "I never thought you were weak," he said finally. "I only thought I wasn't worthy. You made me remember I once dreamed, once wrote, once was real. I had forgotten who I was, until you." Maya turned then, meeting his gaze for the first time. Her eyes glistened with both anger and tears. "You hurt me, but I don't know if, without hearing you today, I'd regret it later." "Then let me have a chance," Adrian said softly. "Not to start everything over, but just to walk with you, like before. No cars, no pretense. Just you and me." Maya sat still. 1 minute, then 2. The wind tugged at her hair, carrying doubts away. Finally, she stood. "Do you remember the park behind the old library? The curved bench under the oak tree?" Adrian's lips curved faintly. "I remember. Let's go before the rain starts." They walked side by side. No more words were needed. Yet in the silence, something was certain. This time, their foundation would be truth, no longer hidden. Sunday afternoon, the sky over Chicago hung heavy, gray clouds pressing low against the rooftops. Maya carried a grocery bag up the worn stairs to her apartment building. At the last step, she froze. Adrian was there. No tailored suit, no sleek car waiting at the curb, just a man in a dark coat, hair tousled by the wind, eyes strained as if he had been standing there for hours. Her chest tightened. Part of her wanted to flee, part of her wanted to listen. She drew in a slow breath. "Why are you here?" she asked evenly. Adrian lifted his gaze, worry etched deep. "I need to talk to you, just once. If after this you still want me gone, I won't bother you again." Maya hesitated, then gave a small nod. They sat on a narrow bench in the back courtyard. A maple tree shed its last yellow leaves, the early winter wind sharp against their skin. Distance stretched between them like a fragile thread about to snap. Adrian spoke first, his voice rough. "I was wrong. Wrong to think you'd leave if you knew the truth. Wrong not to trust your strength. And most of all, wrong to let fear dictate my choices, fear that cost me the trust you gave. Maya gripped her coat, eyes lowered. You always said you wanted me to see Adrian, not the CEO. But you didn't think I mattered enough to know the truth. You took away my choice. You made me feel small. Her words sliced through the air. Adrian bowed his head, fists tightening. I never thought you small, he whispered, voice trembling. I only thought I wasn't worthy. You made me remember that I once dreamed, once wrote, once lived as a man, not a title. I was terrified that if you knew, you'd see only an empty shell, and I'd lose the one thing that felt real. Maya turned to him, eyes shimmering with tears and hurt. You hurt me, Adrian. But I don't know if I'd regret it later if I walked away without hearing you now. He drew a deep breath, steadying himself. Then give me a chance. Not to erase the past, but to begin again, with truth this time. No masks, no walls. Just me and you. Silence thickened. 1 minute, then 2. Wind rustled through the branches above, carrying away her hesitation. At last, Maya spoke softly. If you truly want to start again, prove it by being here. Walk beside me in the smallest, simplest things. No grand promises, no glittering gestures, just the courage to share this ordinary life. Adrian's eyes glistened, a spark of hope breaking through. I'm ready, if you'll let me. Maya rose, grocery bag in hand. She didn't answer at once. Instead of walking away, she headed toward the apartment door, then paused and looked back. You can come in. My father is probably still awake. If you want to see what my life really is, start here. Adrian froze, breath catching. In that moment, he realized this was more than an invitation into her apartment. It was an invitation into her world, modest, narrow, but true. He followed. And in Maya's eyes, for the first time in days, disappointment wasn't the only thing there. A faint light flickered, like a tender shoot breaking through the cold of winter. Adrian stepped into the small apartment behind Maya. The room was modest. An old wooden table, mismatched chairs, the faint smell of coffee and cigarettes. Jorge sat there, glasses slipping down his nose, his warm eyes lifting toward the unfamiliar man. Dad, Maya said softly, her voice tinged with nerves. This is Adrian. Adrian moved closer, bowing his head. Good evening, sir. Thank you for letting me come inside. Jorge set aside his newspaper, folding it slowly. He studied Adrian for a few seconds before nodding. Sit down. There's nothing fancy here, but there is hot tea. Maya quickly poured 3 cups. The room was quiet, the clock ticking steadily. Adrian clasped his hands together, then spoke plainly. Sir, you may already know. I hurt Maya's trust. I'm not here to excuse myself, only to tell the truth. I was afraid that if she knew who I was, she wouldn't see me as an ordinary man anymore. And in that fear, I destroyed the most precious trust I had. Jorge regarded him intently, not judging, only listening. When Adrian fell silent, he finally said, My daughter doesn't need someone perfect. She needs someone brave enough to be honest. If you are here with the truth, then keep that truth always. Don't let her heart fracture again. Maya sat quietly, her father's words heavy yet gentle. Not a reproach, but a trust placed upon them both. Her hands trembled slightly, but her heart felt warmer. Weeks later, Maya accepted Adrian's invitation to visit his family. Their suburban home radiated peace, roses blooming late in the garden. Rose, his mother, opened the door with a gentle smile. You must be Maya. I've heard so much about you. she said, pulling her into a warm embrace. At dinner, the atmosphere wasn't strained as Maya had feared. Elena, Adrian's younger sister, teased him with a grin. I've never seen him put his phone down until you came along. You must have worked some magic. Laughter rippled around the table, and Maya found herself laughing too. In that moment, she no longer felt like an outsider. After the meal, Rose held Maya's hand, her eyes kind. Thank you for bringing my son back to himself. He has lived too long behind cold walls. Maya's throat tightened. This welcome wasn't about who she was, but about what they saw in Adrian's eyes whenever he spoke of her. One evening afterward, while clearing her study desk, Maya received a large envelope from a prestigious design school in Chicago. Her hands shook as she tore it open. Her eyes widened at the bold print. Congratulations! You have been awarded a full scholarship. Her heart pounded. At the bottom, a note read, funded by the Nexora Education Foundation. Maya froze. She knew immediately who was behind it. That night, she called Adrian. It was you, wasn't it? On the line, his voice was steady yet gentle. I never influenced the outcome. I only asked the board to look more closely at a young woman who once set aside her dream for her family. The decision was theirs, Maya. Her eyes blurred with tears. She didn't see charity. She saw recognition, that someone believed in her dream, even when she had buried it herself. Thank you, she whispered. Not just for the scholarship, for believing in me. The days after receiving the scholarship, Maya felt as though she had stepped into a new world. Mornings were still spent at the hotel, but afternoons and evenings belonged to books, sketches, and paper models. Exhaustion was constant, her eyes often red from late nights, yet she carried a quiet joy. I'm finally on the right path, she often told herself, even when fatigue weighed heavy. Adrian often stopped by, sometimes with a meal her father had cooked, sometimes with hot coffee. Other times, he simply sat in the corner, reading a book, while the scratch of her pencil filled the silence. Aren't you bored? Maya asked once, half teasing, eyes still fixed on her sketch. No, Adrian smiled, eyes steady on his page. I used to think happiness only came with closing a big deal. Turns out, happiness can also be just sitting here, beside someone I trust. Her hand stilled. The simple words warmed her heart more than the steaming coffee on the desk. One rainy evening, after Maya turned in her first major project, they sat quietly in the small apartment. She leaned her head against his shoulder, whispering, I've never let anyone this deep into my world. I'm afraid one day it will all disappear. Adrian rested his hand gently on her hair. I was afraid too. But if fear keeps us from loving, then we lose far more than we ever could by trying. She lifted her gaze, meeting his eyes, not the eyes of a distant CEO, but of a man trembling in love. That night, they shared their first intimacy. Not rushed, not reckless, but tender and reverent, like carving an unspoken vow. This love will always be home. Weeks later, Adrian said suddenly, This weekend, skip class. I want to take you somewhere. Maya frowned, curious. Where? Just trust me. Bring a light dress. No more questions. She laughed, though her heart beat faster. They drove out of the city. The road stretched wide, the air grew salty. Maya lowered the window, letting the wind tangle her hair. When the ocean unfolded before her eyes, tears blurred her vision. This is the sea? She whispered. I've dreamed of it since I was little, but I never thought I'd stand here. Adrian only smiled, holding her hand as they walked onto the sand. Waves erased their footprints one by one. At sunset, as the sky flamed gold and rose, Adrian stopped. He turned, his eyes shining with resolve, and knelt. "Maya," he said softly, opening a small box. Inside lay a silver ring, engraved with 2 words, "Choose us." I can't promise life will always be easy. There will be long days, heavy nights, but I promise every day I will choose you. I will choose us. Will you walk with me for the rest of our lives? Maya's hand flew to her mouth, tears spilling freely. Her heart pounded, but her answer was certain. Yes. Yes, I will. Adrian's hands trembled as he slid the ring onto her finger. Maya cried openly now, then fell into his embrace. Under the burning sunset and the endless sea, they held each other, knowing this was no fragile dream. It was a deliberate choice, to love, to trust, to walk side by side, to the very end. The wedding took place on a clear spring morning, not in a grand hall or ornate church, but in a small garden on the edge of town, where white blossoms lined the path and ribbons swayed gently in the breeze. Maya wore a simple lace gown, her hair tied back with soft strands framing her face. In her hands rested a bouquet of wildflowers. Adrian stood in a charcoal gray suit, his eyes never leaving his bride. Close friends, Maya's co-workers, and both families gathered beneath an arch draped in blooms. The air was not loud with grandeur, but warm with belonging. When it came time for vows, Maya's voice trembled. I can't promise there won't be hard days, but I promise that even on the hardest ones, I will still choose you, choose us. Every day, I will choose this happiness. Adrian smiled, his voice steady and strong. I once thought success was tall buildings and large numbers, but now I know my greatest success is holding your hand. I promise to choose you, today and forever. When the silver rings slid onto their fingers, applause rose around them. Yet all they saw was each other, as if the rest of the world had quietly faded away. After the wedding, Adrian brought Maya to their new home in the suburbs. It wasn't large, but the wide windows let sunlight pour in, and the backyard had just enough space for flowers and herbs. There, Adrian fulfilled another promise. One afternoon, when Maya returned from class, she found her father sitting in an armchair by the window, reading the paper with a gentle smile. "Dad?" she gasped in surprise. Adrian appeared from the kitchen, his voice warm. "You once told me you wanted to care for your father while still chasing your dream. Now you can do both, without giving up either." Maya froze, tears brimming. She hugged her father tightly, then turned to Adrian. "Thank you for thinking of this." From that day forward, the house was filled with laughter. Evenings were spent around the dinner table. Some days they planted flowers in the yard. Other days they simply sat in silence, listening to the rain outside. No extravagance, no need to prove anything. Happiness came from the simple act of choosing each other, day after day. 2 years later, on a quiet morning, the cry of a newborn filled a sunlit room. Maya lay exhausted on the hospital bed, but her smile was radiant as the nurse placed the tiny baby in her arms. Dark eyes blinked open, and tiny fingers reached out as if searching for warmth. Adrian stood beside her, his hand trembling as it brushed his son's cheek. Tears welled in his eyes. "Lucas Hope," he whispered. "Welcome to the world." Maya looked up at him, eyes glistening with joy. "Lucas, because I want our son to always know hope, even on the hardest days." In that moment, Adrian wrapped his arms around them both, his heart filled with a certainty he had never known. Success, wealth, status, none of it mattered compared to this embrace. The days that followed carried a new rhythm. Maya learned sleepless nights and hungry cries, yet she had never felt more complete. Adrian, once consumed by schedules, now learned how to mix formula, change diapers, even sing lullabies off-key. One night, Maya found him fumbling in the kitchen at midnight, hair disheveled, shirt stained with milk, patiently rocking Lucas against his shoulder. The sight made her chest tighten, not with weariness, but with a tender happiness. Looking at her small family, Maya remembered the rainy days when she thought of herself as ordinary, nothing remarkable. Now she understood. Love, truth, and the daily choice to stay had transformed an ordinary life into something extraordinary.